Webinar today called Tips for Growing Through Youth Mental Health Concerns. And really, what this is focused upon is is providing parents and caregivers um, valid information to help them move through life with the challenges that they may face caring for their young people in their care, whether or not they may be presenting with mental health crises or just the struggles of adolescence. And for some of you, we could probably still remember that adolescence was not necessarily the calmest period of our lives, with teenage years being confronted with a variety of challenges, which is pretty normal in development. But I think as we talk about this work today, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that within the context of our society, within the context of smartphones, all this information that comes at us as adult caregivers and parents roles that we have, sometimes we can become um, oversensitive to information about what constitutes crises and what doesn't. And perhaps we might find ourselves desensitized as a result of that oversensitivity, if you will, to various issues that our young people may have. So again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to really be talking about tips, if you will, ideas that could be helpful for you as we move forward. Once again, thank you to Four Corners for providing us this opportunity to connect with each other. Chris and Sarah are leads in today's work in terms of presenting and recording this PowerPoint in the presentation for your reference later on. So, as we talked about briefly just a minute ago, boosting mental health wellness is really everybody's responsibility. But sometimes it can be tough, really difficult if their youth is struggling. I think part of what happens with adults in this role is that we become so focused upon trying to problem solve and perhaps trying to respond in a way that can make sense. Sometimes we might respond in ways that don't allow us to be able to look at the bigger picture in terms of what constitutes a mental health crisis for young people, or what might be just simply developmental experiences that our youngsters might be experiencing. This tunnel vision, unfortunately, can um, result in perhaps a lack of breadth of being able to look at the big picture. So today, I'm really hoping that one of the messages you take home is to be able to take a step back and say, well, let me take a deep breath. I need to take care of myself as a parent, as an adult caregiver, as well as being able to look at what I can do to support my youngster. So we look at sort of the data that's out there that talks about that our world. Some of the research talks about that 91% of Generation Z, and that's our kids, that's our teenagers, at digital natives. Isn't it interesting how we are now contemplating our children and grandchildren? They're now part of that digital generation. So what we do know is that there is an elevation of stress and depression and anxiety with this generation. I think we all can offer some sort of insight as to what that might be. The good news here is that what we seem to be seeing is that some of those symptoms do dissipate with maturity and emotional support. The good news is it's kind of like it was when 70 years ago when I was a teenager. Well, maybe not quite that long. He'll grow out of it someday, so that's really not bad philosophy, because it turns out that's maybe part of what can happen. But certainly our youth today's got a lot more challenges, and some of those challenges are related to parental stress themselves. The overscheduling of kids sometimes, the social media, youth trying to compare themselves with others, because oftentimes within the social media world, our teens and preteens might look at that and say, "Well, I should be like that, but I'm not." So all of a sudden, we've got the threshold of anxiety being established that can be somewhat lingering within our youth, and maybe becomes a platform for some adjustment issues as we move forward. So as we go forward, I think what we want to be doing today and the next time we get together, because there's a part two, by the way. I found that we just couldn't get all the tips in part one, so Four Corners team and myself decided we do a part two. So there's more and good stuff yet to come in just a couple of weeks. So what we're going to be doing is talking about what's a crisis or not today, techniques for help, for asking for help, growing hope growing hope within a family who's struggling with a youth who just doesn't seem to be fitting in, or at youth who is just internalizing a lot of different experiences. What can we do to grow hope within that family? So this is what we're going to try to do is today and the next time we get together is really focus upon some tips to survive and thrive, if you will, as parents. So I've kind of put together sort of an interesting sort of little graphic here that kind of puts together what we want to be attempting to do today and next week as well. So we're going to be talking a little bit about responding to what it is, crisis is or not, finding resources, tips for asking for help. And by the way, us as adults, we could really model better how to ask for help so that our youth can learn from us. Because sometimes we feel frustrated. We don't want to be embarrassed sometimes, so we don't ask for help. So, but there are some tips for asking for help that'll make things a little easier. Parental scripts. We're going to talk somewhat today and a lot more next time about some of the scripts that parents can use in engaging with their youth. As a result, we kind of put this together and we build into building resiliency of youth and communication skills. All this is part of that tips idea that we're talking about. So, what is a mental health crisis? It's a major life disruption. Changes in eating or sleeping patterns, inability to get through a day or manage daily tasks. One task is simply getting out of bed in a timely manner, getting to school in a timely manner. One of the challenges that we have in schools across Nebraska and across the nation right now is a behavior called truancy. And by the way, we're talking about the good old days in 150 years ago where Huckleberry Finn and his friends would go truant and skip school and go fishing. We're not talking about that kind of truancy. What we're talking about here is school avoidance, lack of attending classes when you get to school. So when we start looking at that, we see an emerging pattern. It becomes kind of a challenge to sort out, is this an influence by peers or is it part of a mental health crisis? It could be both. But certainly, truancy is something that school districts are struggling to deal with today. And by the way, we're finding truancy within elementary grades. Yeah, unbelievable. We have children in fourth and fifth grade go in, parents drop them off at the front door, and those kids are out the back door by 10 o'clock, and no one knows where they went. That's become a pattern across the country. Extreme emotional distress. This individual is stated severe distress. High risk behaviors. These are behaviors that are life-threatening or resemble past high-risk actions. So when we see these sort of things, those sort of behaviors could be threatening to themselves or to others. So certainly we see those sort of trends, we are probably knocking the door of some level of a mental health crisis. So what is it or was it not? Well, it turns out suicidal ideation, it is. How do we know? they tell others, particularly peers, of their suicidal thoughts, or they may write about it in a class or some sort of method of letting someone know. Having repetitive thoughts of suicide. Again, that could be something that is certainly an indication of suicidal ideation as well as beginning of a mental health crisis or in the middle of a crisis. Perceiving one as a burden. This is an interesting issue that has becoming emerging within adolescence over the last several years, is that when we're looking at interviewing youth who have been suicidal, what we see is a common theme of seeing themselves as being a burden. But they may lack the communication skills to really talk in great detail. It takes quite a bit of interviewing to develop that. And oftentimes I find myself in assessing youth to using a lot of drawing, a lot of encouraging the youth to draw out their feelings and draw out their relationships within their families. A good old-fashioned family genogram works wonders in terms of assessing their relationships within the family structure. Unresolved traumas, that can be an impact. Depression, loss of energy, and so forth. And we talk about self-interest behavior, which is non-suicidal in nature. That is also a sign of a mental health crisis, or explosive anger outbursts can be. I have worked with a number of preteens and adolescents who have engaged in explosive anger outbursts within a variety of structured and unstructured settings. And when we start looking into that, we see that their mental wellness or mental health stability has become under attack, or they certainly are in a early stages of a mental health crisis. Those behavioral threats towards peers and adults, intensity and frequency become keys to watching. What is not? Well, there could be that we could say all of these that we're going to share with you could be, but what tends not to be is these type of behaviors. Runaway, truancy, trauma-related behavioral responses, sometimes neurodiverse behaviors such as autistic behaviors, behaviors associated with ADHD may not be signs of a mental health crisis, but certainly reflections of the characteristics that go with that particular experience that that child or youth is experiencing. This next bullet is kind of interesting, and as we see where sometimes youth are engaging in expressions, but adults around them are overreacting. You know, perhaps that's sort of a desensitization, and they used to see themselves as utilizing that behavior as a means of power and control or deflection, if you will. So, more ideas about what it is not than normal emotional fluctuations, casual use of mental health terms, referring to everyday feelings as anxiety or trauma is different from having clinical disorders. I have, as a school psychologist, I have seen many elementary kids and early middle school kids using these sort of terms. I'm extremely anxious. I am traumatized, you know, which is pretty interesting. There's a lot, which kind of reflects, I suppose, the adults around them using that in their language rather than more developmentally appropriate language. So these kids who are able to still get through the school day, maintain routines, and manage daily tasks, well, they're probably not experiencing a crisis, if you will, but developmentally. So what do we do? So when all this is going on either way of what we call the teeter-totter of life for adolescents and youth in general, the caregivers, man, they exposed to significant stress. And the stress can be a limiting factor. I talked a little while ago about tunnel vision, if you will. And certainly that can limit the caregiver's desire to an ability to search for resources and support. I suggest to families that they look for a trusted navigator who can assist them in finding a path through the resources that are out there. Now, the good news is there's a lot of resources. The challenge is finding the resources that best fits the situation and fits what the family is able to connect with. So part of what caregivers, I hope, can really try to focus on is finding the words to ask for help. For example, I'm at a loss to understand what's going on with my kid. I just don't know where to turn. I'm worried about what could happen in the future. Now, you notice the I statement is critical to be able to clearly identify and clarify what you're concerned about as a parent or caregiver as you express that to whoever, the navigator and so forth. So, one of the things that tends to happen with adults, by the way, is that we might tend to struggle with identifying our feelings, our true feelings. Sometimes we'll say these sort of words, good, bad, mad, or fine. But if we take the time to slow down and search for words that best fit what we may be feeling and expressing that to others as well as to our youth, we're modeling the emotional language that allows it to be the first step to mental wellness is to be able to find the words that fit. Thankfully, there are resources that allows us to connect with ways to help us identify those resources. Boys Town's got a nice range of resources under the trusted your trusted resource of parenting guidance, the family helpline, of course, the 988 line. All these sort of resources which are easily available to any of you to look at, I would suggest you do that. This top one, by the way, it looks at emotional language. This has some nice worksheets about outlining some what ifs and how you can respond in various situations. You know, at the end of the day, and I talked about this a bit ago, is the emphasis upon parents and caregivers finding ways to take care of themselves. One of them is develop an understanding of what might be expected of your youth in terms of developmental characteristics. And that knowledge gives you power. That gives you ability to kind of sit back and filter out some of the information that you are being confronted with. Connecting with others who are committed to the care of your child and youth in a non-adversarial situation. And that's really critical because oftentimes parents and caregivers are kind of like, well, we might be a little bit overprotective. We may be called helicopter parents. We might be called a lot of different things. We may care deeply, but in our enthusiasm, we might unfortunately see ourselves developing an adversarial role. So certainly connecting, but being open-minded and avoiding engaging in an adversarial role is an important step to self-care because that helps you become solid. And be aware of resources. Four Corners Public Health website has a wide range of resources, and the Youth Mental Health Advisory Board at Four Corners has worked with for the last several years, has done a great job of marshaling resources within the Four Corners County area. Warm lines. Though I can't emphasize that enough. This is a great warm line, which means if you're confronted with some challenges and just need to connect with someone, this is a great warm line to connect with. And warm lines are all about finding ways to connect. Give yourself permission to laugh, to smile, and remember the 9 points of self-care. I'm not going to read those through, but I'm just going to summarize this by simply saying to you, be extra nice to yourself. Smile a little bit. Be patient with yourself. Self-care is critical to caring for others. And so allowing yourself to take care of yourself, to take a few minutes that allows you to take better care and help filter out some of the noise that goes around youth who engage in behaviors that cause you great concerns. So as you kind of look at this list and this PowerPoint to be available for you later on, self-care means moving ahead, not looking back. Be proud of yourself and your family. Look at the strengths. I talk a lot about when I work with parents and youth about something, an acronym I call STIs, strengths, talents, and interests. I embrace parents to identify what those are within their children, as well as within themselves, and find ways to connect with each other, praising each other for what you do. So as we move forward to this time that we have allocated to us today, and we're going to talk a lot about this in part two, is the importance of scripts. Parenting scripts. There's a lot of scripts out there, pre-planned phrases and communication strategies that help us. So it's important for us to become aware of what some of those are and be able to start integrating it into our own parenting styles, whatever those styles may be. And what I suggest is that people write down their common responses to their children and adolescents in a variety of situations. Just make a few notes, look at the common threads, and you might find yourself unintentionally reinforcing some of the very behaviors and attributes that you would wish would be different. So that's a great step to start. And then look at some of these scripts and take a couple minutes and practice them themselves, to write them out or somehow look at them. This particular website has a great content for you to take a look at what some of those scripts might be and what they could help you with. Again, they're pre-planned, and sometimes the kids will say to you, particular teenagers say to mom and dad or grandpa, "You're always saying that." Sometimes you have to say that 22 times before the 23rd time before the youth says, "Oh, I get that," you know. Oh, by the way, you might catch yourself saying the same thing your parents might have said. Hopefully that was positive, but also be aware there's a tendency that we tend to parent the way we've been parented, which means we tend to use that same sort of statements that may be counterproductive. Yeah, let that sink in for just a minute, because that is something that is very real. And when I find in working with families through years, those are some scripts that they wish they didn't have embedded in their brains, and it takes practice to unlock those. Scripts that are positive give people the opportunity to manage their own emotions. It gives them consistency, and it allows parents to really communicate intentionally rather than reactively. I can't tell you how many times I sit in different meetings and parents berate their teen or their tween about something, literally berate them. That's not necessarily healthy, particularly in that kind of context. So here's a couple of little tips that you can take a peek at here. As you can see, how to encourage them to express their emotions. Hey, I love that you're that kind of person who has lots of emotions and is open to showing them. What a nice positive script to utilize. Or to show support when they're hurting. And boy, our teens, they do a lot of hurting when they on day-to-day processes. Hey, I sense that you're feeling bad, down. How can I support you? Or you can remind them that you're there with them. It's good that you're expressing yourself. Thanks for coming to me or to us to open up. That is a pearl of wisdom. That's a terrific script to practice, but it's surprising how difficult that parents and caregivers struggle with reminding them that you're there for them. And guide them towards professional help. You know, feelings can be uncomfortable, but you can learn to manage them. I'm always here, but I'm going to help you get the help that you need because you deserve it. So that's a script or two. It's pretty cool scripts. And you can find more scripts at that particular website. I really hope that you'll consider integrating these next two steps for building resiliency and hope within your family. Consider the daily one-word check-in. Begin the evening alone. You begin the evening or alone time with your youth in a car. And by the way, cars are a great place to reinforce children by asking them to describe how they're feeling in one word. It's simple, but boy, does it open doors. Consider the 1 minute gift, as I call it. Give your youth a 1 minute gift, a genuine compliment, acknowledgement, or expression of appreciation. Boy, it's quick, it's uplifting, and it reinforces that connection. One of the keys I think that parents and caregivers are continually working with is working with the idea of wanting to set boundaries. Some styles have become extremely strict boundaries. I really am hopeful that parents and caregivers will take a look at the concept of flexible fences, not broken fences. Unfortunately, if we don't use some of these great tips, we can have broken fences between our youth and our children and ourselves, and it becomes very difficult to mend those fences. We'll talk more about that concept next time. So, as we kind of look at what we've done today in the brief amount of time, I just simply wanted to give you the opportunity to review what might or may not be a mental health crisis, encourage you to become aware of all the resources that are available for you. Remember to take care of yourself, and please don't, should we say, poo-poo or disregard parental scripts because they are very helpful. Accommodate them, search them out, because that allows us to then be able to build the resilience of our youth and communication styles in that effort. So I talked a little bit about next week or next time we meet. This is some of the things we're going to be looking at. End goal is building resiliency by growing hope. But we're going to talk a lot about acknowledging youth emotions next time. How can we go about doing that? We're also going to talk about those challenges. Screen time. How about that? That is a challenge for all of us to manage. Lack of interest in school or motivation, substance use. Those are some of the challenges we're going to be addressing, and we're going to be opening it up for any other comments or conversations about challenges that you'd like to have some guidance or resources to. Excuse me. And we'll also be dealing in more detail with parent scripts. And for those of you who plan on attending next time, I invite you to think about parent scripts that works for you, and feel free to share those with us the next time we meet in the chat box. So that was a quick little half-hour overview. Good news is there are no tests for you today. I trust that you will think about what we talked about and integrate it in your own parenting styles. So, Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Don. Again, excellent content. And please, in the chat, add your name and organization, email address. And we also have posted, if you haven't registered already for part 2, to go ahead. The link is also in the chat box that you can do that. If you have any questions for Don, he just has maybe another minute and then he needs to get off this call. But go ahead and unmute and ask, or go ahead and put it in the chat box and we'll make sure we get an answer for that, or we can maybe address that in next week's talk, John. That would be another option. And to keep in mind, these talks, this series, this part 1 and 2, is for all who live and work with youth. So I know we have some mental health counselors, school counselors. Some of you are parents. Some of you are in the juvenile diversion area. So thank you for the depth that you bring to our time together, and also for the work that you do with youth. We're very grateful. Wendy asked about getting a certificate of attendance, and we can do that if that would be helpful. We sure can. And thank you for putting your information in the chat box. Anything else, Dawn or Sarah, or question?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate any feedback that you might wish to give Chris and Sarah regarding to the content today's, and so we can integrate it into our next presentation, which is on, again, what's the date and time?
December 10th. And we're seeing if this works better for people. We're trying 12:15 to 12:45. So we welcome your feedback on that timing. We knew when we scheduled it right at noon, people couldn't get there right at noon because of being with someone else during that time. So we're testing out 12:15 to 12:45.
Okay, well,
Thank you,
thank you,
Dawn.
Chris. I'll
Thank
look
you
forward to
so much.
seeing you next time. Bye bye now.
Great. We'll leave this open for a moment. And in case you want to add a question or a comment on our YouTube page, we will be sharing also the slides with you.
I actually like this time, Chris.
Oh, good to know, Jackie.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for joining. Hey, Barb, I'm glad this worked for your schedule too.
Yeah, this time works better for me too. So thank you for doing that.
Good to know. Hi, Wendy and Sarah Easterday also, and Bryce, glad you could join us. Great. I guess we'll close it up then.